Good afternoon, LEC community. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Ask an Educator. I am Susana Lizarras, the Vice President of Educator Supports of the Latinx Education Collaborative, and I am honored to be here with the amazing Olivia Flores, and I so look forward to getting into your story. Olivia, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Excited for Friday tomorrow too.
Yes, same here. Um, without further ado, Olivia, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I am a ninth grade ELA teacher, but I do a little bit more than that. So I'm a seventh and eighth grade dual language teacher for ELA. So I teach Spanish language arts, which is English language arts, but in Spanish. And then I also teach one advanced ninth grade class in ELA.
Oh, nice. That's a spectrum. That's a wide spectrum of
I
things that you
know it's
teach.
4 classes, which is
Yeah.
really fun. So every other period, I'm speaking in either English or Spanish, and so sometimes I mess that up.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would get confused throughout the day.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's a fun confusion.
Yes, yes. Well, Olivia, to kind of go a little deeper about where you serve, so you actually are at a performing arts school, is that right?
Yeah, so I work at Paseo Academy. It's a signature school in KCPS. And yeah, so the kids basically, if you're not familiar with our signature school, students have a major where they audition into their major. And so their electives are focused on a performing art. Sometimes it can also be fashion, design, and a specific thing in a graphic art, for example. But it's really fun. Our concerts are very cool.
They are. I have been. When I was a sixth grade teacher in the district, we would take our kiddos to the
Oh,
performances. Yeah, so that they could see what option was within the district, like what art option was there, and it was really cool. The kids always enjoyed it.
yeah, yeah. It's fun to walk around the hallways because so this is my first year at the school, and you walk down one hallway and the doors open and it's just like a beautiful dance floor and like a dance room, and then you walk down another hallway and that you have your huge art room, and then there are a couple things from the past that are like a black room that we don't, or what is it called when you're developing photos? We have
Yeah,
we
I
have
don't
one
know the
of
name, but I know
those.
what you mean. Yeah,
It's incredible. So it's a great thing. It feels like on my floor or on my part of the building, it feels like a very normal like public school classroom in ELA. But you walk down the hall and it's like kids are doing just incredible things. So it's very
yeah, it's
fun.
a really cool space. I know you all have like ceramics and like sculpting is like an option for a class. So you walk into some of those classrooms and people are like
Yeah,
sculpting,
it's so
you know,
cool. I
it's
know.
really, really cool to
Yeah.
see. And there's a lot of history, like for Paseo
Mhm.
here in Kansas City and what it meant to a lot of people. A lot of people have invested a lot into the school. So, thanks for
Yes.
telling us more about the school because I know there's a lot of really cool things about it.
Hmm.
So you teach English language arts but in Spanish. Do you also teach
Yep.
Spanish?
So as in, just as I would, so my formation is in English literature, and then I have
Mhm.
a lot of education in Spanish too. So I can talk about my background, but basically, in any ELA class, you do a little bit of grammar or working on writing and sentence structure. So the same thing happens in my SLA class. It's the Spanish language arts class. We read literature in Spanish, we discuss literature in Spanish, we write about it, and then I do like some applied grammar, where students need to review things, where to put accents, and how to say certain things. So there's always kind of a grammatical element in
Yeah.
most lessons.
Yeah, I thank you for inviting me recently. I got to talk to Olivia's
Yes.
students recently, and you, I mean, of course, right? Like you want to encourage the kiddos to use Spanish, like in their, like we're in the auditorium, but still, like even if we're not in the classroom, we're using Spanish. So you and I were speaking in Spanish, and I, I always like get so nervous My mom doesn't speak English. Like I've spoke Spanish my whole life, but it's so ingrained in us to like speak English that. But I wanted to model what you were modeling, right, with the kiddos, like speaking Spanish.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of the dual language,
yeah,
the model of the dual language program is that as their teacher, so they get, some of their classes in English, some of their classes in Spanish, and as their teacher that teaches in Spanish, ideally, I'm never really speaking English to them except for the bridge, which is something that happens at the end of the unit where you actually, transfer their knowledge and say, hey, if you take an English class or a literature class next year and that's in English, I want you to know this vocabulary in both languages. So that should really be the only time I'm ever speaking to them in English. And it's really interesting because, in the hallway or in front of them, I'll try never to speak English, but I teach another class in English. So they'll walk by and they'll hear me, and ideally that's the only time they would ever know. So it was really nice. Thank you for doing that with me and modeling that. But what you're bringing up is a really interesting point, like how we use Spanish and how we show kids where we use Spanish and the value of the language. And that's at the core of why dual language exists or why dual language education exists.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing a little bit more about that. I know more and more schools are committing to there's a difference between having a Spanish class in a school and then being committed to like dual language immersion, right? So seeing how more and more schools are committing to really immersing their students into a second, and for some of them a third and fourth language. I know Paseo is also the designated DHH school, the deaf and hard of hearing school, because I know it's so cool. I taught at the elementary school that was designated DHH, and the kiddos moved over to Paseo, and so some of them are multilingual in that way, like knowing ASL. So shout out to Paseo and the DHH program. Y'all doing amazing things. So more about you. Tell us, kind of give us a glimpse into your upbringing or growing up and where you grew up, and kind of what brought you to teaching.
Okay. So when I think about my upbringing, it's really, connected to my family's upbringing. And I mean connected not because they were the same, but because, it's obviously a direct result of where my family comes. I'm a result of where my family comes from. So basically my father is a Mexican immigrant to the United States. He came when he was very young. And my family immigrated to Chicago. And he grew up in the city of Chicago, went to public schools, and was elected or got into kind of like a magnet school in Chicago called Lane Tech. And then from there, went to the Northwestern University near Chicago in Evanston. And we've kind of been around the Chicago area ever since. My mom is from a big Irish family. She's one of 8 siblings, and they're just hilarious and really, I don't even know how to describe my Irish family. I love them so much. They're just, it taught me so much about what family means, and like, the closeness and the craziness and the humor. And keeping in mind kind of like a different immigrant story, really, their generation on that side, and the value of, working hard. My grandpa was a scientist, and, had like $100 and drove to California to go to school at Berkeley, and, had a baby and missed his exam and had to show the birth certificate to pass the exam. Like all these stories like really, really mattered to me when I was growing up, because I got to learn about, immigration and families and, making a life in the United States from both of them. But honestly, they worked really hard to just give me a suburban life. I grew up, they immediately, when I was born, they moved us to the suburbs to attend public schools in the suburbs. And I lived in white suburbia primarily. All of my friends were Indian and white, and I got to grow up with a lot of privilege and not a lot of my culture. And it wasn't until high school and college when I kind of wanted to investigate that in terms of education and my own family. And I always talk about how I had this identity crisis in, what was it? In college. I tested out of all of my Spanish requirements. I didn't grow up with Spanish because my dad said, as many families do, well, why would I do that? Your mother does not speak Spanish, so why would I teach you that? And we, as a family, we've, been talking about this ever since. What was the rationale behind that? And why is it that all of my cousins are half white in some way, or I'm half Irish American, others are a mix of different ethnicities, and Caucasian, identify as Caucasian, completely, or don't know anything about their heritage. And so I think all of those things have been a continual conversation. What does it mean to be mixed ethnicity? And then what does it mean to grow up in kind of a white culture, and then I understand so much more later. So it's a lot of good conversations in the family, but that kind of identity crisis really led me to education and understanding why I got to have that privilege growing up to go to a very nice public school that taught me to do the things that I do now, and then also like exploring Spanish language. I applied on a whim to a program. I didn't tell my parents that I was applying. It was it's called the Gilman Scholarship. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the Gilman is basically for Pell Grant recipients who receive federal aid, and they might pay for, a large part of your study abroad experience. And I kind of applied on a whim to learn Spanish and, to explore my culture. I didn't really tell my family about it. And I got the scholarship, and 2 months later I said, hey, I'm going to be gone for a semester. And my family does not leave the country. My mom didn't even have a passport. And, I went from there. So that's a very long answer, Susanna, to your question. But no. I think basically, my personal identity and my upbringing was exactly what led me to try to I'm trying to switch into Spanish already, try to recover some of my language and culture from my dad's side, and still maintain the wonderful parts of the culture that I have grown up with, and explore the mixture of the two. So being an educator is representing that kind of confusion and that mix, while also being very critical about what does that mean for all communities when it comes to receiving quality education. So yeah. And plus, I just think it's really fun. I think teaching is really fun.
It really is. Mm-hmm. It really is. We talk a lot about the struggles of it and how difficult it is, but teaching is really fun. A couple questions. Where did you study abroad?
So I didn't study Spanish in college because I just kind of I was resigned to the idea that I would never really speak it that well. Like I had a high school education and I just wouldn't study it. So then when I saw this poster, and if you know me, you know the story, but basically I saw this poster that said, it's not too late to study abroad. And I thought in my head, this is so frustrating. Like, we don't have the money to study abroad. I don't want to see this. Like, I want to get this dream out of my head that I'm going to study abroad. So I walked frustratedly into the study abroad office, and I was like, what, that poster? I thought it was too late. I'm a junior, it's second semester. And they're like, no, you can actually still study abroad if you'd like. And I was like, well, can you just tell me I can't? Because I don't want to think about this. And she's like, okay, who are you? And so then she told me, she said, okay, so what funds do you have to study abroad? Like, where would you want to go? What would you want to do? And I was like, well, I have no funds. I do forced work study jobs. Like, I was like, I have no, money saved for this. And she said, okay, well, that sounds difficult. And I said, great, thank you, I'm leaving. And then she said, but there's one scholarship, apply for this scholarship and you can go. And with this scholarship, there's just a handful of, with this program, there's only a handful of programs that teach people Spanish who are intermediate speakers. Mm-hmm. So I only had like a couple options. And the best one that I found was actually in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So I learned really my fluency in Argentina. And so now I speak with vos. So I use vos, the form, not the to form, the vos form, which if anyone's listening and you're not familiar, I didn't even know it existed. I was like, is that vosotros, like Spain? And they said no. And I was like, well, I'm Mexican. How I'm not going to be able to communicate with my family. But now my Spanish is a beautiful mix. So after that, I was in Argentina. I lived in Colombia for 2 years, did the Fulbright program and got an extension with that. And so now my Spanish is just, I use Mexican slang. I have an Argentinian accent sometimes. I use vos and,
That is so cool.
It's very weird.
That is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so cool. And it relates kind of what you're saying with your mixed ethnicity, right? Like I when you mentioned that, I thought about how many of our students can probably relate to that.
Yeah.
Two sides of an identity, but it coming together to make you, right? And so that was kind of my second takeaway from your story. Like, do you ever have students that can relate to you in that way? That's like, I have this part of my identity and they feel very different a lot of times, but they make me. So then, like, where does that fit in? Do you have students that can relate to you with that?
Yeah. Well, I think on the one hand, absolutely, I do. Yeah. I think a lot of times I have students who are, have you ever heard the term, what is it, a sabo kid? A student just told me this the other day.
I've heard that, but I don't know what it means.
So I'm assuming, because he kind of said it, on the side, he's like, look, I don't know if I can, we were in class, he said, I don't know if I can do this assignment. I'm just a sabo kid. And I said, okay, sabo. Okay, so that would be how someone would conjugate the verb saber.
Yeah.
And if they didn't know that it was irregular, instead of saying like yo sé, like I know, they would conjugate it and they would say sabo. So that's, I think what it's trying to say is that someone who's from a Latinx household where maybe they're speaking Spanish at home, or maybe, their parents speak Spanish, but maybe they speak to them in English or whatever it is. Maybe they didn't learn Spanish in a formal way, or they don't have a lot of exposure to Spanish. I think what he's trying to say, and maybe someone who's watching will know better, that he doesn't know Spanish, or he doesn't feel as comfortable in Spanish, even though he comes from a Latinx household. So so when I hear something like that, I can immediately relate, because Spanish wasn't my first language, and for many of my students, it actually was. So we're some of them. So I think we're in this kind of interesting community, because so many people have, even if their parents come from the same city in the same country, they still have different experiences being in this country. So whether, and just as a side note, not all of my dual language students are native speakers or come from Latinx households. And anyone can be in the dual language program if they've come up with if they've been in an elementary school, for example, that's dual language, or they can easily facilitate conversation in the two. So, but speaking about my Latinx kids, yeah, I absolutely have kids who are just in this, interesting situation. Maybe their parents speak Spanish to each other, but they speak half in Spanish, half in English to the kids, or maybe the kids stopped speaking Spanish when they were 7 or 8, and then they lost their ability to speak Spanish as well or as fluently, or maybe they don't know that, maybe they reject it for certain reasons, or maybe they don't. So it's really, I think the takeaway for me is that everyone has a really complicated relationship with their language and culture, especially when there's a prominent language in the culture. even within their community. How often do they get, made fun of for, how they say things, or, what they know or what they don't know? And what does that mean in terms of where they belong?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times, we can say that all first generation kids have the same story. And I wouldn't necessarily identify myself as first generation, because my father was so young when he immigrated here. So, but I think it just speaks to the idea that everyone has a very unique relationship to language. And when I think about my personal relationship to it, I could immediately say to them, well, what do you think about me? When for example, when I'm teaching and I make a mistake, they'll just correct me, and we normalize it. Or they'll repeat it back to me, or everyone's learning together. And I know that's a cliche thing that teachers say, but it's no more. It's so potent in my classroom because we all came to language in a different, the language that we're communicating in, we all came to it in a different way. So that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea, is to value the language and to make it normal, to make mistakes and to keep learning. Because otherwise, what are we doing now with these two identities?
Yeah. Well, and there's a wide spectrum of experiences when it comes to being bilingual or knowing the Spanish language in particular. I mean, it can be kind of I don't want to say controversial, but kind of a hot topic for Latinos, right? Because you have some families who have been pressured to let go of the Spanish language in order to fit into certain communities or certain neighborhoods, right? And then you have your spectrum of parents or generation who's scolds their children or like really pressures their children to stay and learn the Spanish language, right? So there's also the consideration that like people experience different things depending on the neighborhood they live in, depending on the access that they have to clinics or health, or right, like just all of those things. So to minimize it to we all should know Spanish or we shouldn't all know Spanish, right? Like it's difficult to even do that. So it's really cool that students in your classroom can be comfortable to say, I mean, like I said, when you were talking to me in Spanish, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to say something wrong. And then the kids are going to like correct me. But like,
that's okay. And that's okay. Yeah.
That's really awesome. It's exciting. It's exciting to know that that's happening in your classroom, because how affirming it is for students who maybe language in particular is a difficult part of their identity, or for some reason they're anxious about it, or so thank you for sharing that. I know that there must have been hurdles. I mean, you've spoken about a few already, but some hurdles in your journey to becoming a teacher. What's a hurdle that you'd like to right, like
teaching is running hurdles. It's like I think of that track event. I'm like, look, I've been teaching for a minute here in a lot of different ways, but I can't, and I feel very comfortable and that I have successes in my job. But I seriously, at the end of every day, I'm like, I did it again. Whatever the hurdle was, the random one that you knew about or you didn't know about, hey, we got it. We did it again.
Yep. You got through it. I mean, I remember there was one time I was teaching and someone was like, how's it going? I was like, yeah, and they said, just taking it day by day. And I said, teaching is really taking it hour by hour. So you never know what's going to happen. What have been some hurdles, in when your dream of teaching started to now being full blown, you have your own classroom, kind of a hurdle that you had to overcome?
Oh, wow. There's so many. Well, I think, so speaking to all the, topics that we're speaking about, privilege has to come up basically every time. So I think when I was in high school, I just looked up to my AP teachers a lot. I got to take AP classes and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And the conversation was so cool and it was so rigorous. And so I went to college and I studied English literature so I could be a teacher. So I knew that I wanted to be a teacher from when I was a junior in high school, basically. And I think when I went to college, I guess we'll get to the privilege thing later. When I went to college, I really struggled because being an English major is like, how do you defend that? I think I didn't want to fit into a cliche. I didn't want to
Interesting. I never
be
thought of that.
Oh yeah, I struggle, with especially with my, feminist lens. I never wanted, I always think about how people were so supportive of me in terms of pursuing my English literature degree, as they should be, because I've had the privilege of being around a really supportive family and a really supportive academic environment where people made me feel like I could really do anything, which is another reason why I went into education, is that I really want to be that person who can give a kid permission to be excellent and to know, because even me today, if someone doesn't say like, oh, Olivia, why don't you think about this program? Or why don't you make that happen? You've talked about it. Like, why don't you make that happen? Even though I know that I can do anything, right? That I'm very determined and motivated as a person. Something about someone giving you permission or saying that you can do it is just it's like a little release that's like, it's so validating in such an important way. And I think we take that for granted sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
I know no one needs to tell me that I can do something. But when they do, it is so, even as an adult, so important. So I think for me, when I was, growing up in college, I was like, oh yeah, I can do what I want. What do I want to do? And when I chose an English literature major, I kind of grappled with it because I said, these are the classes I'm interested in. I love this topic. I think English literature is an avenue to learning how to be human and learning about humanity, and gives us a vehicle through which we can be better humans and have better discussions and educate children through these discussions. It's like the perfect topic. So it's a perfect subject to teach. So when I think about that, but I also have this like, voice in my head that thinks about, well, we don't really, our male identifying students, we don't really allow them to pursue English majors, or, maybe through the privileged ones can pursue an English major. But I kind of think about it almost like, in our society, do we only allow people to be English majors if they have enough money to sustain themselves, if they're going to be teachers? Are those the only two reasons why you can be an English major? And when we talk about education and it being feminized, sometimes I think like, is it okay to pursue what a privilege it is to pursue a major in college that is truly your passion? It is not something you're pursuing in order to be financially stable and to financially support your family. So I guess one little hurdle or something that I always think about is, wow, what a privilege it was that I could pursue my passion. And for me personally, I knew that I am going to be financially independent. And I know that, for me and for my family, that I will be that person and I will make it happen in education. But I think it's just a really interesting thought for me is, how lucky I was to be able to do that, and how many people don't make that decision, whatever their passion is, because of what they believe will not be lucrative or doesn't make sense. Education for many people is just not feasible. It does not pay enough for your family or whatever it is, or maybe it doesn't give opportunity. And so I wonder, like, how, especially in the Latinx community, like, we need Latinx teachers, especially, at Paseo and at our schools. And, but I understand how sometimes it's not feasible based on our, the country that we live in today and what would be financially feasible. Yeah. So that's one big tangent, but that was one kind of obstacle in me pursuing education, is that thought. But other than that, I think I've pursued education at all costs, and money was always a factor. I tried to get scholarships as much as possible, and through those scholarships alone, I've been able to pursue my degrees and pursue the opportunities that gave me the abilities that I have now to teach what I teach. So I think, coming up, being in college, I absolutely had to have, Pell Grants and scholarships and support. And in my first job out of college, I wanted to stay in the country. And so I, pursued my teaching degree with Teach for America. They had scholarships to help you earn your master's degree in a convenio. I never know how to say that in English. A relationship or a cooperating relationship between Teach for America and the university. How do you know how to say that in English?
I don't know the word.
Convenio?
Mm-mm.
Maybe
I don't even know convenio. No.
Oh, I don't know what it is. So they have a relationship.
Google translate it.
Yeah, we're gonna Google translate it. So so through all those programs, I've had the opportunity to pursue scholarships. But that was really a big hurdle for me was how am I gonna pay for college? How do you pay for a teaching program when you go to a liberal arts school that doesn't give you certification? And how do you learn Spanish when you didn't grow up in a country? I had to go to another country to learn that. I had to have someone else pay for that, all these things. They're like, it makes it so difficult to be a strong educator and have the expertise that you need to really be in front of kids. And it just gets so expensive. So that would probably be my second one, is just so expensive to get your education, to be that educated person in front of your kids and to be ready for them.
Yeah, I mean, that has come up in several of our interviews, like paying for college and having a job through college and having to pay your way and finding enough scholarships or taking out loans, and so then now struggling with that, right? It's a big reality. And then, like you said, for some people in our community, or really just people in general, money after you're committing for at least 4 years to a university degree, to when you look at like the starting salaries for a lot of jobs, if teaching is being the lowest, it's not super lucrative for people who either that's top of mind or who don't have the privilege to say, like, I don't have to worry about and maybe that's not the right thing to say, right? Because I think everyone has to consider money for the most part. But like you said, it's for families who don't have the option to make as little as teachers do. That's a very big reality. It's funny you asked me about convenio, because I've had my own difficulties, like with my identity in the Spanish language, because I learned Spanish through my mom. My mom is actually she was deaf for the first 15 years of life, and she's hard of hearing. And so her Spanish is, she has a speech impediment, and she can't read or write. Spanish is her first language. She's immigrant from Mexico. She can't read or write in Spanish. And so for a long time, that was a pain point in my identity too. Like, I didn't know, like, convenio, I've never heard that. And it's just those more like technical, complicated terms. So growing up in my neighborhood where a lot of people did know Spanish, I was like, I'm not going to speak it because I felt like I didn't know how to speak it well, right? And I think a lot of our kiddos feel that way too, like, if I don't know how to speak it right, so I'm just not going to speak it,
Right.
Language has definitely been a recurring theme in kind of your story and in your interviews. So of course, the hurdles you mentioned, some of them are ongoing, right? And teaching and a global pandemic and all of that is difficult to be living through. And so my next question is, what keeps you going? What keeps you motivated to teach?
It's a great question. We really had to pull deep, in this last year and a half, 2 years. I mean, the thing that always brings me back, I think it's, someone asked me, where do you most feel like yourself? And I feel like a lot of people would say, with my family or with my partner or when I'm in nature, whatever it is for that person. I remember one time that I said, I think it's like when I'm teaching, I think it's, I
Mm-hmm.
can really be myself. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I'd still agree with that younger version of myself that said that. Like, of course, I'm not totally myself,
Yeah.
when I'm
Yeah.
instructing a group of 30 kids. But I think there is a version of myself that I
Mm-hmm.
really love when I'm teaching. And it has to do with, feeling a certain flow, and um, and feeling so, it's real. I mean, a classroom is such a weird microcosm of
Mm-hmm.
society, and you see them basically every day for many, many hours, and you're in this community of young people, and and you're responsible for facilitating their growth, and just even getting them through that day, whatever's going on. There's so many different things, and I think it's just a really challenging profession because it's a people profession, but also there's this huge academic component. And so I think what really motivates me is that I can be with people. I can try to be, potentially the best part of their day, or a good part of their day, or at least a humanizing interaction. I can create this humanizing interaction with people, and I can do that minute by minute, in my entire
Yeah.
day. And so I think it's, for me, I really love that connection with people. I'm like a textbook extrovert, but I think it really comes. My energy comes from getting to interact with people, adults and young people, and um, getting to explore also subjects that I think are really beautiful and
Mm-hmm.
really important. Learning, shaping, and helping someone be really critical with their eye when they're reading, or when they're exploring a different argument, and then really refining and helping someone craft their own voice, and no matter what language it is. I mean, it's just how many professions allow you to have the creativity to craft learning, and power learning moments, and powerful academic moments, but then also like build connection with people
Mm-hmm.
continuously. You're performing, and you're preparing, and you're thinking, okay, as a professional, how am I going to convey this information? And you also have to be able to digest and understand this information so well. So it's a learning opportunity for me, but it's also a really moment by moment
Mm-hmm.
experience that I just adore. So at its best, that's exactly what's happening all the time, and even at its worst, that's exactly what's happening. It's a human interaction. And so it's an up and down roller coaster, but it's a really valuable one and really unique one. So I think, yeah, that's what gets me through it, is that it's just the coolest profession. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It
And
really
coffee also gets me through it. I drink so much coffee now, but those
yeah.
two things.
It's a very rewarding profession for sure. And what you're talking about is something that I would refer to too, is like you're helping raise other people's children. Like you really are a part of
Yeah.
raising all of these people. And I think we tend to get really distracted, not just in teaching, but maybe sometimes in parenting and just child rearing in general, about like what the standard is, or like what should be done, or the way that it's been done, right? Versus this is a little part of this person's life, right? So as a seventh grade teacher, as an eighth grade teacher, like you are the person's life revolves around, at least some parts of their day revolves around living and growing with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was the coolest thing to me when I was teaching, and it's what you're mentioning, right? Just like how special it is that you get to contribute to this person's like stage in their life. And when you're doing it well, like you said, on the best days, they're learning and they're growing and they're shining and achieving and being challenging each other. And that's really cool. I love your answer. And thank you for sharing. Like that was that was awesome. You almost made me cry there. So so now here it really comes the part where I'm gonna be like, oh my gosh. So if you had one thing that you want every one of your students to walk away from your
Mm.
class knowing or believing about themselves or thinking, what is the one thing you'd like them all to know?
Oh.
I know, right?
Um, I think something that I always go back to, or something that I'd want all of my students to know. And this is like the cheesiest. I said this to someone one time, but I just so truly believe it. And it's not just because I'm an English teacher, but I want people to think about my students to think about, one, how much I love them and how much I care about them. And two, how they are the protagonists in whatever their story is. And so when something is going wrong or there's a huge struggle, great, that's chapter 7. And now we're going to go on to chapter 8. And this is the part where you really kick it into mode and you take care of yourself. And there's 3 paragraphs about how you, whatever, the montage of you being able to get support and you feel loved and you realize what you were telling yourself before was not right. And that was, the low part of the chapter. And now, you can decide your next one. But what I find is everyone deserves to feel as loved as I was when I was growing up, because I had the best teachers, I had the best, parents and, family, and they're not perfect, which is why they were such good teachers, because they, no matter what happened, whatever the struggle was, they showed so much love and confidence. And so I really just want to impart that on my students, is that, hey, even if, you don't love yourself in this moment, you're still the main character in your story. So, and that person that you're talking to, they're the main character in their own story. And we all want to be the best protagonists ever. And your story's still going. So keep living it and thrive and make your story a really, really good one.
Mm-hmm. I should have known that your answer was gonna be like that deep, right? Like you just told me that. Like I'm about to walk away now having thought like, okay, yes, like I got this. Like you just inspired and motivated me.
You
I
are.
mean, I'm always inspired by these conversations, but like, I mean, how thoughtful that was, and how I'm really excited that your students have you.
Oh, thank
That
you.
your school has you. Yes, of course.
I'm lucky to have them.
Yeah, and to affirm who they are and affirm their identities. I mean, we use the term identity so often these days, right? When we're talking about, um, you know, I mean, I just think we talk about it often, which is really good, but I think we're getting desensitized to it a little bit. And so
Mm-hmm.
for every student to know, like, you have lots of parts of your identity, and like that's okay, and that's a little part of this whole
They're
story.
forming. They're
Yes.
still forming. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely
Yes.
didn't. I still don't have my identity figured out.
Yeah.
I had to do a little bit of work on myself before I started teaching in 2 languages, but it's a work in progress.
Yes. Well, yeah, and then you always learn more, and more people come into your life, and the world shifts, and all of those things. So Olivia, I really appreciate you taking, I know it's a teaching day, and to be with us at the end of a teaching day, it means very much a lot to me and to the LEC. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And we'll be in touch. Let's stay in touch and let us know
Absolutely.
how to support you always.
Thank you, thank you. And I just want to say thank you to everyone at LEC in the community. I moved to Kansas City like three years ago, running on 3 years, and the community has really made me feel at home and supported. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the love and you guys existing and doing the great work that you do here.
Thank you. That means a lot. We have someone right down the street from your school, or at least near
Oh,
it. Carver Dual Language School says thank you. Thank
oh,
you.
Carver.
Yes, thank you, Carver, for listening in. Your fellow KCPS school listening into your story. Um, Carver and KCPS, you have an amazing educator on your hands. And so, Olivia, thank you for what you do, for your commitment, for your passion. And we'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, Olivia, we'll talk. Bye, everyone.